This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, health, tax, professional advice. We're not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host or the management. This podcast may contain adult themes, so parental discretion is advised. So welcome to the Modern Titus 2 Women Unplugged podcast. Our podcast is one where we fearlessly dive into the unspoken struggles that shape the lives of women today. As part of our mentoring role, we seek resources and support designed to help women thrive. We explore strategies for achieving optimal well-being and performance throughout every stage of our life. Today we have Gail Hugman, and she's an educator and a best-selling author from 100 Things to Learn Before You Are 10, and her most recent book, Making the Pennies Drop. So welcome, Gail. Welcome, Gail. We're so happy and so delighted and so honored to have you in our presence today. Could you expound on your credentials and you are an author of some best-selling books, and if you would like to just expound on that also. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello. Yes, I started teaching in 1974, and there's been a tremendous amount of change in the world since I started teaching. I'm in the UK. Most of my teaching was in London and around London, UK, although I did spend a year in Colorado, or in Boulder rather, and a little school there as well. I taught for 30 years in schools and then realized that life had not improved and attitudes had not improved. And I wanted to get to the core of what makes children tick and how can I help that process. So I came out of teaching in schools and I set up my business, Lessons Alive, to focus on motivating children. And that has been a most wonderful journey for the last 20 years in people's homes before the pandemic, and since the pandemic online, because I'm still working. And I realized quite quickly that there is a whole other curriculum, if you like, that children need to know and need to be taught to do well in the 21st century, but that isn't taught in school. So when a parent is telling their child that the teacher wants you to listen more, the child may not know what listen means. They may not know the difference between hear and listen. And so I started to look at the core skills and what children need to be able to be engaged in their learning and not just going through the motions. So that's and then, of course, having discovered this stuff, I thought I got to tell parents somehow. So I wrote. I hadn't set out to be an author, but it's too important to not spread this to parents, because the parents that I met would say, I wish there was a manual. I wish there was a book that helped me. And 100 Things to Learn Before You're 10 came first. And then Making the Pennies Drop was published this year. And that is what they're about, the skills children need, the attitudes they need, and how a parent can talk to their children about these things to make it easier for everybody.
So what are, not going into great detail, but what are some of the skills that children should learn before they're 10? What are some of the skills?
The core skills, there are, it's called executive function skills, but I didn't think that was a snappy title for a book.
No.
So the executive function skills, I prefer to use the 10 which I can't remember off the top of my head, but self-control, time management, and self-control includes listening and focus. And then we've got time management, organization. They're all in my book. Let me see if I can find the list.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Now that you've asked, because I think it's important that parents
Yes. Yeah. So these are critical skills and concepts that they
so oops.
Oops.
Oops. So here's the list if you'd like to. Self-control, focus and attention, organization, memory, especially working memory, planning, time management, critical thinking, task initiation. Task, I always say to the children, it's about starting work yourself.
Tough what?
Task initiation.
Oh, task. Okay, all right.
Perseverance and flexibility. And I split it because I worked mostly with primary children. And I would say that before puberty, because of the way the human develops and the brain develops, before puberty, the first 6 are the most important. And then from puberty, you can expect critical thinking,
right,
initiation, perseverance, and flexibility. So you can encourage a child, and you know, I used to say to the children in the classroom, I'm going to live until I'm 328 years old.
There you go.
And they would say, you can't do that. And I'd say, why not? Who says? And there you have an example of critical thinking, because they had to, and you know, I would ask them questions like this to start that process of critical thinking. Why? Well, why not? What's the reason? You know?
Right.
I think children, when they know these skills, when they develop these skills, because they're born with the potential for these skills, but they may not automatically develop them in our present culture, in our present world, because parents are rushed off their feet. And many parents are working to make ends meet, and so to control themselves, but they don't know how. And so I train children to be in charge of themselves, to take control. And I've put the exercises that I use into my books so that parents can dive in and say, how am I going to get my child to listen? Oh, look, there's an exercise in here to help me.
Okay. That moves us into the segue here about modern parenting challenges. What are the modern? What are the ways do you think modern parenting challenges have changed since you start teaching?
Oh, wow.
That's gonna be a mouthful, isn't it?
Oh, wow. A large part of it, I mean, when I started teaching, children did not have mobile phones.
Yes.
Did not have social media. We had a fraction of the world population. I mean, the year I was born, there were 2.25 billion people on the planet. And now there are 8 billion people on the planet.
Right.
And so the pressure and the stress levels have increased enormously. Children want so much more, and we have an almost instant world. And so rather than save up for, children want it now. And peer pressure is very strong. So I think this is a huge battle for many parents. And also a lot of parents talk to me about screens and the effect on their children, because they're out of their depth with it, because they didn't have it and their mothers didn't have to deal with it. So we're looking at a generation of children. You know, an 8-year-old boy last week was crying to me because his dad has taken his phone away.
Oh, yes.
I said, well, he's trying to help you because your brain is completely fixated. And he said, yes, but I can't socialize without my phone. And this is very alarming to me, because you don't get a full human experience of social unless you mix with people. You can't do it online.
Yeah. But even in the communicating with you, they use these symbols, and instead of writing the word, they're using symbols and kind of thing. I'm like, and even if you're in the room next door, they send you a text. Why can't you come over and knock the door and say, Grandma? No, they're sending me a text, and I totally ignore it. You can come and talk to me. We're the same house.
Yes,
It's crazy.
yes.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
so I see, but I also see how some children are vulnerable to almost addiction to screens.
Yeah.
And parents don't know how to stop that. And children will say, oh, I don't need to write. I can text, I can do it on the laptop. But what they don't understand is that the brain needs the patterns that we create when we write, actually reinforces learning. And so it's important that some of the skills that we have, like handwriting and memory skills, these are important.
Mhm.
I attended a webinar myself about memory, and one of the leaders was saying how people these days put everything into their phone or into their iPad, and they rely so much on it that the brain loses that capacity. And then you're going into consequences of not using your brain to its full effect. Children, I'm talking about, how do we develop these skills so that they have a firm foundation for life?
But well, even myself as an adult, I before the advent of the cell phone, I used to know everybody's phone number, the children's phone number, right off the top of my head. No, I don't see the number, I just see the person's name and I click on it and it dials the person's name. So if you ask for the number, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know the number.
Yeah.
It's really bad for us, It's really bad for us. Yeah.
I used a lot of games in my teaching, but I use the games to target skills. So I have a little girl I'm working with who's doing sorting at the moment with a game. Games according to the rules. I use them as a resource.
Right.
And I asked her mum just to do some sorting and organizing with these cards. And this little girl, I thought it was really sweet. She said, "This is my favorite game ever. Don't sell it when I go to school."
Oh,
Which I thought was really sweet. But they want to learn. And I see children's behavior when they're badly behaved or poorly behaved is because either they don't know something, or they're frustrated by something, or they want to learn something to ask. And so we need to be able to teach them how to be independent so that we can get on with our lives, because they enjoy that. They actually want,
That's true.
So they don't want us breathing over them the whole time.
No.
And I do say to children, would you like your parents to be in control of your life, or would you like to be in control of your life? And they always say, oh, I want to be in control of my life.
Yeah. But so The role of the parent and the role of the educator. What are your thoughts on that? The role of the parent versus the role of the educator.
I think when I first started working privately, I was surprised because as a teacher in school, I used to worry that I might upset a parent by something I did with a child. You know, if I told them off for something, it might conflict. And then when I went working into people's homes, I was surprised to find that parents were very nervous teachers. And I thought, all these years I've been worried about you, and now I find you're worried about me. And I think it's a team. I think it's a teamwork. I
Right.
think more and more now, I will explain to parents, this is what you need to, how you need to approach the school, get what you want. And to say, you know, I think if parents are trying to teach their child to be better organized, they can start the thing at home and they can see that it will help their learning. And they can tell the teacher, I'm working on organization at home and I'd really like your support in school as well.
Right.
So that they work together. You know, teachers, yes, they've got a curriculum to deliver, which is government. And then parents are doing the personal development, if you like. They do the softer skills, those core skills that the child needs to be able to perform well in school.
Right.
So the listening and the focus. But it's hard to do if you don't know how. And that's another reason I wrote the books.
Yes, that's very good. You mentioned the importance of understanding how a child's mind works. What are some of the misconceptions that we as adults and parents normally have, you know, when we deal with children in regard to how they learn?
I think sometimes we forget that children are very intelligent. They don't know a lot of stuff about the world, but they are very clever because they're human and humans are intelligent. And that we tell them things and we go on telling them longer than we need to tell them. I mean, and so, and I see sometimes parents will keep on telling a child and the child will get annoyed and fed up. All I say, if I'm helping them, is to say, what you need to do is start to ask your child. That development takes place about 7 or 8. So to 7 or 8, you are teaching a child, don't do that because it's not good for you, because it's not safe, it's, you know, whatever it is. But once you get to 7, there's a developmental shift that automatically happens in human beings. And they start to realize they're an independent life. So even to the point where a child has wanted to do their homework at midnight. Really? And will say, you can't do that, you've got to get up the next day. And I always say, don't fight. Let them do it when they want to do it, because that is a brain testing the boundary. But tell them you can do it, but you've got to get up the next day.
Right. The consequences that nothing's going to change, but you're getting up at the same time. Yeah.
Exactly. They need to get the actual consequence, because if you say you can't do that, they see the brain, as soon as let me give you an example. If I say to you, Lorna, would you open that door? If you say yes, then the minute you say yes, your brain manufactures the energy for you to do that. So if you then get up and walk to the door, and I say, oh no, don't bother, you will either go, oh, or you'll do something to disperse that energy.
Yes.
I'm going to use it to get to the door. With a child, they have a process that's going on, And then you come along, or we come along and say, right, come on, we're going here. And that process has got energy with it. And if you take them out of that process, then you're going to have a tantrum on your hands.
Yes, that is so true. You know, I'm thinking no, because my granddaughter, if you take her, one of them at least, if you're taking her to the park, what I hear my daughter says, we're going to the park, but you know, when it reaches 12 o'clock, we're going to go and get some snacks or lunch, and you know, near to the time she reminds her, oh, it's getting near to 12. We're going to go and get some lunch. And she automatically cooperates. But if you don't tell her all of that, you say, okay, we're getting ready to go. On the grounds, you know. So, yes, I see that. That's true. Yes.
It's the energy that they've manufactured in themselves to do something, and then they've got to do something with it.
Oh, yes, like create a tantrum.
Best way to get rid of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I said, oh my gosh, that's so true. Yes, yes, yes. But I was wondering, like time management for children. It's that you're saying that is one of the critical processes that they need to learn.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so I'm just thinking they have all the time in the world. Why they need to do time management?
No. I have these wonderful. This is a 10-minute one. I love these. It's about the brain. If you say, you know how we say, hang on a minute.
Right.
I'll be there in 2 minutes.
Right.
Moment. Their brains do not know how long a minute is. Now, when they get into an exam and the examiner says, you've got 5 minutes left, they have no idea how long that is. They have no idea what they can do in 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yes, okay.
And I've seen parents fighting with children for 2 hours to do a piece of homework. And I say to them, don't fight with them. They have however long time to do 50 that homework. And they say, they'll never get it done. And I said, well, okay. They won't get it done, and they take it to the teacher and they say, this is what I did in 15 minutes. But if they, and then you say, tomorrow I want to see more. Because if they understand the concept of time, and you'd be amazed how many 8, 9, 10-year-old children do not know that the day changes at midnight.
That's true. That's true.
If you say, when does the day start? When I wake up.
Yeah, that's the general answer. Yes.
So in my 100 Things to Learn, I've gone right through the hours of the day, when you need to focus, when you need to concentrate, and give them a good sense of what can they do in a minute? How many hops can you do in a minute?
Oh, okay.
How many pictures can you color in a minute? They have no idea. And I asked them first, how many times can you write your name in really nice writing? How many times can you do that in a minute? And they'll go, oh, 50. Okay, here's a minute timer. Have a go. And of course, they go 6 times or something. And so they get that reflection that, hang on, my brain is more creative than I would think.
Right.
And it's all about teaching the brain, because the brain is not equipped for life until it has reference and it has connections and it has started to develop skills working for that person.
Oh, that's so interesting. One would, you know, as you correctly say, if a person doesn't have an idea what 5 minutes looks like, they just don't have an idea what 5 minutes looks like. Yeah, that's good. That's good information. So what about emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence in the early stage.
emotional intelligence. People talk about children having big feelings, but I remember a child, because they're still developing. I think
Mm-hmm.
to your question of what do adults, what is it adults think about children?
Mm-hmm.
That is a mistake, if you like.
Right.
Is that they are miniature adults, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
They are not yet developed. And so they're being able to talk about their feelings, their in feeling, is very difficult. When you go anywhere, you will revert to feelings
Mm-hmm.
as your base because you've got no reference, you've got no idea. You know, if I plonked you down on the middle of the moon, in the middle of the moon, you would start what you feel.
Right.
And that's what happens with children when they're young.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They are based in feeling, and that goes on
Mm-hmm.
to puberty. I mean, we have our feelings to inform us about the world, but children act on feeling. So when we say to children, why did you do that? They often don't know. They will stand there and they won't know what to say because they're reacting to a feeling. And so when I work with children who are very reactive, I will ask, I'll use my minute timer and I'll say, I want you to do anything you like for a minute. You can run around, you can shout, you can scream. I don't like this bit. And you can do that for 1 minute. And when I say stop, I want you to stop because we need to teach them how to self-regulate.
Oh, yes.
And so, and I've had children who find it very difficult. They may be have ADHD or they may be neurodiverse.
Right.
If you're patient and you do this, you know, the start of every session, I would say, you can go crazy for 1 minute and then they say, I want to go crazy again. I say, okay, you can go crazy for 1 minute and then you come back and we have to be quiet until they manage internally to control that, because that's how they will need. I mean, obviously, there are some children who need medication to help them, but that's the reactive, overstimulating world that we're in.
Right. That is so true. That is so true.
They're very sensitive creatures.
Yes. Yes, it's true. Sometimes we don't give them credit. We just see them, then they don't understand, you know, what is going on, especially in cases where the home environment is not that stable. They understand, and you know that's why it's important that we put ourselves in a situation to allow children to be children and not to you know take up the stress of adult responsibilities. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay, so what has been some of the most rewarding experiences for you providing one-on-one teaching? What are the experiences with one-on-one teaching, rewarding experience?
I think, I mean, even yesterday, I've seen a little girl twice now. Well, I always do an assessment before I work with a child, and I talk to the parents a lot about, find out about them before I meet them. Then I do an assessment through a number of activities to find out where their strengths are and where I might be able to help.
Right.
And then I start teaching sessions, and I've done 2 sessions with this little girl, and her mother said, I just want to thank you because I can see such a difference in her already, even with the session, because I'm giving her, the mum, I said, I'm giving what she wants instead of her being on her iPad the whole time. She's following me around and she's doing quite useful.
Right.
But the little girl is loving it because she's responsibility and it was within her capability and she understands what she's learning. And I think it's when I go to a place and a child and parent, quite a while ago, a mum crying when I talked to her, and she said, I don't like my child.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she said he was being so difficult. And I said, I think you'll find you actually do love your child very much, but you don't like his behavior. And within 2 weeks, they were getting on so much better. If anybody is having an issue with a child, it's the adult can step back and think, what is this child in their behavior? What am I giving them what they need in their development?
Right.
What are they trying to say?
So as a segue to what you just said, so what are some of the challenges that parents are having to motivate and inspire their children in your estimation?
I think the biggest one is this wanting, I think it's one of the greatest challenges is the speed at which children are developing these days. And the fact that you have this peer pressure.
Oh, yes.
With, if I can't do what my friend, they did a study on the television on BBC, the network here. They asked for volunteer teenagers to give up their phones for a week. And so they had about, 8 or 9 teenagers volunteer give up their phones for a week. I think 2 or 3 of them gave up after 3 days. They needed their phones. And then they all got together in the studio at the end of the week and asked how they got on. And what was interesting was 2 of the girls said, well, I talked to my mother more. One of the boys said, I slept better. It is this wanting to be part of the group.
Yes, absolutely.
And the fear, they all suffered fear of missing out because they felt they couldn't connect with their friends. And I think that is a huge challenge for parents because they don't necessarily want to give them a phone, but because everybody else is having one. And also, they don't want to tutor their children outside school, but the competition now is so great, and everybody else, that's how it feels. Everybody else is doing it, so I have to do it. So I think sometimes the world we're in is forcing parents to go against their better judgment, and they are having to provide things for the children that they wish they didn't, but that is how the world is. And so I think it's in moderation. We need to look at it all in moderation. I mean, obviously they need to be technically savvy. That's the world they're in. So.
Yeah. All of us, because even myself, I have to make sure I keep abreast. And these kids know all these technology and how to do stuff. Sometimes I call my granddaughter, said, can you help me with this? And she's, oh, grandma, and she just does it quickly. I said, but if you don't show me if you don't teach me how to fish, I'm going to fish. She just does it. I still don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are the biggest barriers that you notice to effective learning that most children are having?
I think it is. That's a big question.
well, we can, from my perspective, I would think that the whole technology and the bombardment with so much different information that could be one of the barriers to effective learning, because some of the things that they're watching aren't really good for them. And
I think as well, it's personal development. It's not knowing it for children, not knowing what they're meant to be learning or what they're meant to be doing.
Yeah.
And when I meet children, I actually meet a list of skills. And I say, while you're young, it's your job, you know, it's your
Right.
teacher's, and it's your job to learn. And if you feel you're not learning or you're not understanding, questions. And if you feel nervous about asking questions at school in front of everybody else, then you talk to your mum or your dad, and they ask questions. But we have to get children to think they need to conform, but expect them to want to learn. And you know, I tell them school is teaching you about what is here before you're born. It's teaching you how we communicate. It's teaching you how we value mathematics. It's teaching you about the planet and science. And you need to know that stuff so that you can develop yourself and be more creative in the world and help improve it. So I think having that purpose will help.
Okay, that's good. I noticed that throughout the conversation, you always mention something about play with the child. How does play structure the learning process for the child?
If you will see a lot of games or activities, and people will say, this, they will learn that. And I will say, no, they won't. Let's think. If you want a child to learn a particular thing, because you are educating their brain hasn't been in the world before.
Right.
If you want to play a particular game to develop a skill, you have to tell them what that skill is.
Okay.
They won't automatically learn it. So, I'll give you an example. I invited a farmer to come into my classroom when I was working in a school. And the children were in year 5, with, you know, 9, 10 years old. The whole day, the farmer bought his vegetables and he talked to them about vegetables and he talked to them about growing things. And we had a lovely day. And at the end of the day, I said, what one thing have you learned today? And I was surprised that they told me that they had learned that farmers are quite young and good looking and that farmers wear earrings. And
nothing about the food. Nothing.
that was on the side. So when you want a child to learn something, you have to say what it is you want them to learn.
Yeah, that is so true. Yes,
so I can play the same game all sorts of different ways to teach different skills. So, you know, I'll say to a child, I want you to learn more about self-control. So we're going to do racing around the room. And when I say stop, you've got to stop. But we're not worried about how fast you race or where you race. We're just worried about, are you in control?
Right.
Focus
so
on
in
that.
regard, yeah, that was a very good example. So how do you help parents who may feel overwhelmed and unsure about how to support their children in learning?
I think you have to take it day by day. I think you have to talk to the teacher, not be afraid to talk to the teacher. And I think you have to focus on one thing. Me having just told you 3 things. No, I think, no, it is quite a challenge to raise a child in the 21st century. And I think talking to other parents about how they are managing as well, not in competition with other parents, but as a support, and talking to teachers about how they think their child is doing and how the parent can help, and ask for resources.
Right, right.
Because we're all in the same business of trying to get these young people to be lovely adults.
Yes, that is true. Now, if you could change one thing about the current educational landscape, what would it be and why?
I think there ought to be more communication between parents and teachers. I think when people realize we're all on the same, we're all fighting the same fight, and we all want the same thing. Actually, we're not at difference. I think that would help enormously, and that teachers could say, you know, I'd like your help.
Mm-hmm.
Have your child be more focused, because often I'll see in newspapers, you know, that parents think teachers should do more of this or teachers should do more of that, and teachers say parents should do more of this, parents should do more. Let's all talk about it.
Yes, that is true.
That's all we want is decent adults at the end of it.
Yeah, that's true. Now you work in both areas. You've worked in an at-home environment and in a school environment. How does the different environments impact on the child's learning ability, the retention of information?
I think expectations are different. So at school, a piece of work can take 15 minutes because the environment is set up for learning. And at home, that same piece of work can take 2 hours of power struggle. The child doesn't want to do it. And I think if parents step back and say, this is your job, and if you need my help, I'm here, and I will sit with you while you do it if they want to. Or I will go away and leave it to you, and you talk to the teacher about it. I am here to support you. Then and give them time limits on it. To set expectations, because I remember a mother saying to me she was really pleased because her son focused on something for 20 minutes. And I said, you're looking at your little boy and you're thinking 20 minutes is good. I'm looking at a year 5 child, and I know that child can work for an hour.
Okay.
Because children know very quickly how to manipulate the situation.
Oh, yes. It's interesting because I did a podcast on newborns, and it was very, very interesting to know a child knows when a baby knows when somebody's in the room as opposed to when nobody's there, you know, and knows to cry out to get that for the
very intelligent.
Yes, that is true. Can you talk about the balance between nurturing a child's independence and providing them with guidance that they need? The independence as opposed to the guidance, nurturing their independence.
Nurturing independence, allowing them to make mistakes.
Okay.
Even though you don't want them to.
Okay.
I can give an example where I was working with a family, and the 12-year-old boy wanted to buy something online, and there was a dead. And she had said to him, you have to be in charge of this. You have to do this. Now, every time she said that, she would keep reminding him, there's a deadline, you've got to, you know. And I said, don't remind him this time. She said, but he won't do it. He'll forget. He won't. And I said, well, okay, so what's going to happen? Not the end of the world. Anyway, she went out to the park. She was walking around the park. She's texting me saying, I want to go in and tell him.
Oh my gosh.
So I wrote back saying, you're doing well, stay in the park.
That was
anyway,
hilarious.
he missed the deadline. He was furious. He was
with himself because he was the person who was supposed to.
He was furious with her until
Really?
she said, I did tell you, it was your responsibility. And that is how tough lessons can be. But
Oh,
that's,
yes.
you know, and I think people are afraid times of the tantrum that will come. The tantrum that comes is that brain that's been relying on you to be responsible for it.
Right. And that is
And
so true. Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm.
and so, and with little one, I remember I was watching a man in a coffee shop. I like coffee shops because I watch people. And a little girl, she must have been about 4 years old,
Mm-hmm.
this huge muffin in a plastic bag, and she was going to pull it apart, and the muffin was going to fly across the room.
Mm-hmm.
To pull this, to open it, her father turned from getting the coffee, and he turned around and he said, no, 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 no. And of course, you can imagine what happened. He took it from her. She screamed because she got the energy ready.
Right. Open the bag. Yeah.
And I thought, what a shame, because if that muffin had flown across the room, okay, it would have cost another muffin. Or, that would have been the lesson, and she would have learned that very early on.
Mm.
I think sometimes when, obviously I don't want the children to be in a situation where it's dangerous.
Right.
Or it's going to hurt them.
Right.
But there are lessons that you can teach as long as you tell. And I always say it's this brain that you're talking to.
Right.
Remember, it's that brain, and that brain is a perfectly capable brain. And we have to show them how things are. There are two sets of rules in the world, one that's on the culture, and one that's natural.
Right.
And while they're young, they're learning two sets of rules.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a natural life and a world life. And so they need guidance to know what's good for them, what's not good for them. You can't make the decisions necessarily for them, but you can tell them how you feel about the decisions.
Right. Yes. That is so true. That is so true. Well, we're coming up to wrapping up time. It's really been good, but I have one final question for you.
Okay.
What do you hope will be the lasting impact of your work on the future generation of children and their parents? Your impact of your work.
I would love to see a shift away from getting away from conforming to what's already here into a more natural development course, so that children focus on their personal development and use the world to help them with that development, so that they're not focused on getting possible at the expense of their health, but they are focused on getting the best job possible, because that's going to give them the opportunity to develop more of themselves. It's a shift in thinking.
Yes. So there we have it, folks. Modern Titus 2 Women Unplugged gave you, I'm sure it was, as a wealth of information to me. I'm sure all the women who are listening to it, or anybody, male or female, it doesn't matter, that this is a wealth of information. And Gail has some books that are there. So would you mind telling our listeners how they can get your books, and if you have any freebies for them, you can also tell, and we'll.
I have two books.
Mm-hmm.
I have 100 Things to Learn Before You're 10 and Making the Pennies Drop.
Mm-hmm.
Are available on Amazon. I have a mailing list where I give tips, a newsletter with tips, learning tips. I'm on Instagram. I'm new to TikTok, but I'm on TikTok. I don't do the dancing.
No. Okay.
And
They're probably saying, "Shucks, she doesn't do the dancing."
and I'm on Facebook. So,
Alright.
and I do assessments for children, and I work one-to-one online to help put children in natural alignment so that they can use the world to develop these skills, develop themselves, and become amazing human beings.
Okay.
Oh.
Yes. So thank you so much. I will get the information from you and put it in our notes in the podcast that, I'm sure persons are really going to want to delve more into the information that you have here. And once again, I thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thank you.
It was really fun. It was fun, informative. And as I said before, the Modern Titus to women, thank you.
Thank you
again, dear. All right. Okay.
Thank you.